Now, I want to create here neither a psycho-historical understanding of Ayn Rand nor rationalize her extreme views, but 12 years old is a pretty impressionable age to watch one's successful father lose everything he worked for so hard to obtain. Additionally, Ayn Rand's mother was a deplorable woman who frequently told her daughters that she never wanted children, hated caring for them, and only did so out of duty. Now, I'm not drawing any conclusions that having a vicious mother, coupled with devastating social circumstances, can produce a right-wing monster. But you can make those conclusions yourself if you want. I'm just fascinated by a person who would ultimately convert millions of people to a new faith in egoism and transform, like none other, the quality of selfishness from that of traditional vice to one of utmost virtue. Now, as it turned out, Ayn Rand did make it to Hollywood. She spent time with aunts and uncles in Chicago, and she was so disliked by her aunts and uncles, they kept moving her around from house to house because she never had any friends in Russia. She just had personality issues, and when she felt that she had just been shuffled around too much, off she went to Hollywood, and she went right to Cecil B. DeMille's studio, met the guy, and he took a shine to her instantly, loved this young Russian girl with her heavy accent, and got her a job on staff. While in Los Angeles, she met a fellow named Frank O'Connor, whom she persuaded to marry her. After several extensions, her visa was soon to expire. And so they were married in 1929, the year of the Great Crash. A few months later, Rand applied for citizenship as Mrs. Frank O'Connor. I really want to discuss Rand's view of individualism, but will add parenthetically that we would have had much more fun this morning if I chose instead to dissect her love life. But I'll give you a sampler. I cannot resist. She had a torrid yet complicated affair with a student of hers, Nathan Blumenthal. Twice a week, she would kick poor Frank out of the house so she could have private time with Nate. Frank knew the situation, but like many others, was kind of afraid of Ayn Rand. Nathan was married and was 25 years younger than Ayn Rand. I figure, good for her. But when she was turning 60, and he a mere 35 and divorced, he fell in love with a very attractive woman his own age, but was afraid to end the relationship with Rand. So he feigned impotence. And so Rand took over as his therapist. This went on for many years. And when finally his beautiful wife died unexpectedly, it all came out in the wash, as Freud would say, and Rand's relationship with Nathan was forever severed. There's a lot more, but let's get on to her philosophy of individualism. The most fundamental rule that she embraced is what she would call safeguarding individual rights against the mob. And when you kind of had that image in your mind, you can easily trace that back to her experiences as a 12-year-old girl. She felt the safest way for individuals to flourish was through American capitalism. American capitalism could only thrive, as it was meant to, by putting oneself above all others while crushing everything in one's way to get the best for oneself. Morally, she contended that this selfishness was not a desired outcome per se, but it was It was a means of getting there. It was really a motivation. Motivation to live as one pleases and thereby attaining the pursuit of one's happiness. Now, this argument holds certain appeal to anyone looking for a license to be greedy. But she gets herself into a little hot water, and so did Paul Rand, when this greed failed to be tempered by anything. Christianity, she maintained, was destructive to selfhood. Christian ethics made life flat, empty, lacking all beauty, all fire, all enthusiasm, all meaning, and all creative urges. She referred to Christianity as kindergarten for communism. Her objection to Christianity was that it taught believers to put others before oneself, an ethical mandate that matched the socialist mentality of placing the group above the individual. Christianity would eventually lead, she said, Christianity would eventually lead to the triumph of socialism. Well, I think we can all agree that Rand is absolutely right on this point. The liberation theologians in Latin America during the 1970s brought Christianity perilously close to the far left by insisting, imagine this, that Jesus' ministry rested exclusively in advocating for the poor, thus placing the onus on the wealthy to serve the least of these. And the nuns on the bus just this past summer infuriated the Pope with their left-leaning agenda. I am convinced that every one of us here has at some time questioned the bizarre relationship between Christianity and capitalism. How can a Christian radical concern for the other coexist with capitalism's prime virtue of being selfish? It never made any sense to me. And Ayn Rand explains rather pointedly that the two, Christianity and capitalism, can never be in bed together, although conservatives these days try awfully hard to merge the two. It was, in fact, up until 1950, that you did not have to make any case for faith in order to identify as a conservative or to support capitalism. But in 1950, as the Cold War closed in, communism became identified as a godless ideology, and capitalism thus became linked to Christianity. It was a young William F. Buckley, Jr., and his first book called God and Man at Yale, where he recast the struggle between individualism and the collective as one that was between godless communism and God-centered capitalism. In 1952, Whittaker Chambers defined communism as man without God. That sealed it. To differentiate capitalism from communism, God became a major player. When mixing free enterprise together with Christian charity and humility, it becomes much more saleable, blunting the piercing arrows of laissez-faire capitalism. How successful the merger of Christianity with capitalism will be determined, I think, in this coming election. Rand's peer group, basically sympathetic to her offering a good plug for self-interest, asked her kind of shyly, they kind of asked her nevertheless, if she didn't feel that some exceptions to all the selfishness didn't really exist. They figured that parents must take care of their children before themselves. That sounds logical. But Rand replied, if the child has no one but the parent, and the situation is such that the parent has to sacrifice himself and die, how long would the child survive thereafter? In this vein, Rand had contempt for anyone who placed another person ahead of himself. This included Robin Hood, whom she cast as the most immoral of all human symbols. Rand preferred the practice of seizing humanitarian aid intended for poor countries, giving it instead to the productive rich. Rand was repulsed by John F. Kennedy's inauguration speech, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." This was a shameless example of a collectivist who demanded that men live for the state. Ayn Rand attacked not only Christian ethics, but altruism itself. She viewed altruism as placing others above oneself. And perhaps this resulted from her childhood witness of the state taking away her father's hard-earned assets. For her, life was a fight to keep what one had worked for away from the state, which wants to distribute it to others in the name of justice. And so today we hear accusations against the president of wanting to redistribute monies, a prime Ayn Rand example of the state taking away what is rightfully yours. Obama's words, taken out of context, which had him saying nobody built a business by themselves, deliberately misleads that deeply rooted American pride in individualism. It suggests that evil government collective taking away from proud and productive individuals. Ayn Rand and Frank O'Connor were married for more than 50 years. Soon after Frank died, Ayn was diagnosed with lung cancer, smoking 2 packs a day nearly her entire life. She died in 1982, New York City. There were more than 1,000 mourners outside who couldn't get in to the mortuary. Next to her coffin was an enormous topiary shaped into the sign of $1. Who's afraid of Ayn Rand? In 2008, more than 800,000 copies of Atlas Shrugged were sold. One of her devotees, Paul Ryan, is running for vice president on November 6th. The captivating allure of selfishness and greed is ripe for the plucking. Who's afraid of Ayn Rand? We shall see. We shall see.